friends and family. I hope you beautiful people are having a fantastic day. Today we are making waakye and all the side dishes that accompany it. So if you're not familiar with Ghanaian cuisine, waakye is from Ghana, West Africa, and it is made with rice and black-eyed peas. It is very flavorful. And then we are featuring the Waakye Stew, which is a flavorsome stew made with a surf and turf approach in this video. Followed by some fried plantain. You cannot have some good waakye feast without that spicy, delicious fried plantains. Then we also have the gari photo, which is going to be also packed with so much flavor, it is going to be blowing your mind. Another delicious side dish we're featuring is the talia. Talia is spaghetti. Yes, we're going to pack some flavor into that as well. It's going to be exquisite. And then we're going to serve the final dish with a dollop of Nanabe's Kitchen shito, which you all already know. And if you don't know, it's linked below. It is mind-blowingly, exquisitely delicious. So let's begin. So the goal today, friends and family, is to cook within 3 hours, not exceeding it. So to do that, we want to be extremely organized. I started gathering all my ingredients last night just before I went to bed. What needed to be prepped has already been prepped. So I'm going to begin first by soaking the beans. So I have my pot here, which I'm going to be cooking my waakye in. I have a colander sitting inside of it. To be efficient with my time, I'm going to pour the beans into the colander that sits inside the pot and soak it right in here for about 1.5 hours. It is always a good idea to soak your beans because they are bone dry. So soaking them will help them to hydrate, and that means that they will cook faster. That will also save us some time. Now let's zero in on the preparation of the waakye stew. That takes the longest to cook. So I have some cow tripe, cow hide, oxtail, goat meat with skin on, and I have boneless beef, which is the flank part, and I also have some cow foot. The cow foot and the hide take the longest to cook, so I have parboiled them. So they'll cook with the rest of the meat at the same time. And I also have some fish. I'm using red snapper. And for the spices in this bowl, I have crushed black pepper and white peppercorns. This is coriander seeds, dry rosemary. And then I also have aniseed, which is going to help us to tame the game in the meats we're using. And our dry red chili flakes here will bring us that needed, well-developed depth of flavor and heat. Now here is my homemade all-purpose seasoning, and then I also have my homemade curry powder as well as some salt to taste. And to bring more flavor to our assorted proteins, we're going to need to prepare a marinade, beginning with half of a large onion, some ginger, garlic, 1 habanero chili. You can use Scotch bonnet if that's what you have available. The ginger I prep by cutting them into discs against the direction of the strands so they can blend smoothly. All of that goes into the blender, and I'm going to add my spices now. So into the blender, I add my coriander seeds and the dry rosemary, followed by my crushed black pepper and the white peppercorns. Then I also add the aniseed, the red chili flakes, and I'm going to add half a tablespoon of my homemade curry powder, half a tablespoon of my homemade all-purpose seasoning, which you can substitute with your bouillons. I add some salt to taste and a little bit of water just to get those blades moving and to blend this mixture until we have a smooth puree. The Waakye Stew ingredients have been listed in the description box, including their amounts. All the meats now go into the pot, and most of the marinade goes onto the meat. I reserve about 3 tablespoons worth of it and pour that onto the fish to marinate that as well. Now the fish will be marinating in the refrigerator, but it will be taken out about 30 minutes prior to frying, so we bring it to room temperature before it goes into the hot oil. And the blender is rinsed with about half a cup of water because the meats in here do need moisture to tenderize. And then I'm going to cover this pot. It's going to go onto medium heat pretty soon. The fish is stirred up so that the marinade coats each and every one of them. And then I cover it up with saran wrap. It goes into the fridge soon to marinate. So the fish is marinating in the fridge. The meat is now going to go on top of the stove to start cooking and tenderizing, which gives us time to continue moving right along in the prepping phase of our Waakye feast today. The rest of my fresh produce I'm going to actually use to prepare the Waakye Stew base, which is tomato base. So I remove the seeds out of all of my 5 tomatoes. What I'm going to be doing is preparing a homemade tomato sauce with this. The seeds and the tomato juice, I just reserve that and make soup out of it on another day. So they go into the pot. The flesh and the skin of the tomatoes go into a pot, set that on medium heat with the lid on to begin with for about 5 minutes until it comes to a boil. The lid will be removed at some point when it comes to a boil actually, and then we'll turn the heat down to the lowest heat setting until it is nicely reduced. Then I prep the rest of my fresh produce. There are several secrets to arriving at a delectable pot of Waakye stew. One of them is lots of onions. So I have prepped by roughly chopping some onions into this blender. I have added some ginger as well and blending it till I have a ginger and onion puree. Just created some space in the blender. I do have some more onions. So into the blender, the rest of the onions go. Now I'm going to be adding 1 sprig of fresh rosemary and 2 habanero chilies, who will serve the purpose of perfuming our oil for the Waakye stew preparation. Now we are going to prep our ripened plantains. These are sweet and soft, and I just cut them into half to begin with. And I use the peel of the plantain as a guard to protect my fingers. Cut them up into bite-sized pieces and add some African spices to spice it up. All right, the sweet and the spices really elevate the flavors here. And then I add some salt as well, which enhances the sweetness. Then 3 tablespoons of my onion and ginger puree to it. I have on this channel a well-detailed recipe in a video, and I have linked that video in the description box of how to actually prepare this lovely Ghanaian street food known as kiliwili. So please be sure to check it out. I put a cling film on there and I let it sit and hang out. Yes, these plantains could also use some time to marinate. Check in on our meat. It's now nice and tender. It's been 35 minutes into the cooking of the meat, all right? So I stir it up and check on the tenderness, and it is perfect. What I'm going to do now is separate the oxtail, the boneless beef from the tripe, the cow hide, and the cow foot, because I'm going to be frying the oxtail and the boneless beef. The rest of the meat do not need to be altered in terms of the rest of its preparation. So we set those aside and then incorporate those into the stew when the stew is well developed in its flavors. Now checking also on the tomatoes. They have reduced beautifully. I'm going to now blend them until I have a tomato sauce, which will be used to prepare the Waakye stew. What we want is for it to be super smooth, just like so. So see, now all of our components for preparing our Waakye stew base are ready. We have our tomato paste, our onions and ginger, our aromatics, the tomato sauce, our seasonings and spices are also ready. Everything is always very smooth sailing when you're organized and prep everything to the T. All that's left to be done now is skillfully and methodically layer each and every one of these components, all of our flavors, until we get that delectable Waakye stew. I have some avocado oil going into the pot. I'm going to begin first by frying my oxtail and the boneless beef. Now, frying these meat pieces is what you do to take advantage of every opportunity you're given to maximize your flavors. Frying the meat until you have that golden brown color to it is equal to lots of flavor. And here are the cow foot, Hyde, and tripe transferred into the bowl with the broth as well. I'm also cleaning as I go, so that gives me the opportunity to clean the pot I cooked the meat in and stow it away. Our beans are now well hydrated. We are ready to cook some waakye. See how soft they are? So it'll take less than 15 minutes until they're cooked to a tenderness that I want, al dente. So I've poured the water out as I lift the colander out. Just throw it out and then thoroughly rinse the beans. Pour it back into the pot. Add some water. I added 1.5 liters of water to the pot of beans. Set it on medium heat. But before then, you want to also add your waakye leaves. These are sorghum leaves. It is optional. You can cook your waakye with or without the sorghum leaves. I do want that burgundy authentic color to the waakye today. So rinse those out also perfectly. Add them to the pot and throw the lid onto it partially because you don't want it to boil over and create a mess. When you're preparing a feast such as this, you want to create less mess as possible. So your cleaning is easy and peasy, all right? So see, the meat is now perfectly brown. Take those out of the oil and set them aside. We're going to continue cooking the Waakye stew. Now we have our fish dredged in some flour, just all-purpose flour, and we're going to fry those as well till crunchy and moist on the inside, and we'll set those aside as well. Checking on the Waakye, we're multitasking, so we're going to continue going back and forth. That's how you prepare a feast. All right, so you have to be really dexterous and be able to multitask. So the waakye has been, the beans rather, have been cooking for about 10 minutes. They are almost coming to a boil. I'm checking on the fish. I have already flipped them. Those are ready. They're nice and crunchy. Take them out and let them drain the excess oil onto the paper towel. Those are ready. Set those aside as well. We'll incorporate them later. Now checking on the waakye, I did add a pinch of baking soda to extract the dye from the sorghum leaves, and that's why it's so dark right now. I have another detailed recipe in a video linked below in the description box on how to prepare waakye. I've also added some salt to the beans. You want to season after the beans become al dente. If you add salt too early on in the preparation of your waakye, the bean grains will seize up and they won't become as tender as you want them to be sooner. All right, now I've washed my rice and I've added it, stir it in, and I'm drizzling in some virgin coconut oil, the cold pressed version. That really elevates the flavors in your waakye. All right, like I said, I do have 2 recipes linked below for how to prepare your waakye. Now let's continue to prepare the actual waakye stew. So I've put in to the oil I fried my meat and fish in, my fresh rosemary, and for the habanero chilies, what I did was I burst them so that the extraction of its flavors, the spice and perfume the oil is swift. I also added the curry powder to the oil, and now I've added my tomato paste. I'm going to fry all these ingredients together until I have a dark brown rich color, and then we'll proceed to the next step. All the flavors layered thus far have perfumed this entire house. That curry powder, when it goes into the oil, oh, it blooms. It smells like a party. The feast is coming together, and I'm very happy. I'm checking on the waakye. It's almost there. Still has a little moisture in it, so the heat is still on the lowest setting and the lid is back on for about 5 more minutes. And back to our waakye stew base. The tomato paste is fried well, as you can see. I have added another secret ingredient. This is bicarbonate of soda or baking soda. Yes, it takes that bite, that tangy bite out of the tomato paste, and it gives it a really meaty flavor. Waakye stew with baking soda or kanwe, if you're in Ghana you can use kanwe, is exceptional. That is the secret to that meaty, deep and authentic waakye stew flavor. Now I also added the onion and ginger puree into the pot and stirred it in to combine. Clean the sides of your pot, throw the lid back on, turn the heat to the lowest setting, and let it slowly develop its flavors. At this point, the waakye is also done cooking. Turn the heat off of that, throw the lid back on to retain the warmth until we're ready to serve. The waakye stew has been cooking for 15 minutes after adding the onions and ginger. The oil is now coming back to the surface, so it's almost there, friends and family. Thank you so much for sticking with me thus far. Please give me a thumbs up if you haven't already done that. Please and thank you. You see, Sister Madame is trying. All right, so now I've added my tomato sauce and then I just stir that in. The tomato sauce is already cooked, so we're almost there. We are almost there. Thanks again for sticking with me. Throw the lid on and turn the heat all the way to the lowest setting. Now we're going to just take our time and finish up the waakye stew cooking. All right, the oil is back on the surface. It's been about 7 minutes since adding the tomato sauce to it. The stew is done. We are 35 minutes into cooking the waakye stew, the tomato base part of it so far. So it is a good time to now add your cowhide, the skin and the foot, including the broth, into your tomato base stew. The waakye stew is almost done cooking, friends. Remember that the broth and the rest of the meat that just went in have all those spices and seasonings. Oh, it is tasting great right now. I'm also adding my fried meat pieces in there as well. There is a little bit of moisture in the stew, so that's going to rehydrate these meat pieces. Now it's a good time to taste for the presence of enough seasoning. All right. All the oil that we use in cooking this waakye stew is going to be skimmed off at some point, so keep on watching, friends. Give me a thumbs up, share this video with your friends and your family, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. So I tasted and I want a little more seasoning, so I added my homemade all-purpose seasoning as well as a little bit of salt. And stir that in, and now it is perfection in a pot. Exquisite, as I promised in the beginning. All right, so now throw the lid back on, still on the lowest heat setting. Give it about 10 minutes and voila, friends and family, how exciting. Look at this pot. You see nothing but loads of flavor. All the meat pieces have a great texture to them, especially that cowhide. You don't want it to melt. You want it to have chew to it, but still be tender. Perfect. We still have some components for this feast to prepare. To prepare the noodles component of this feast, which is the talia, I have brought some water to a boil and seasoned it well with some salt. I have some rice vermicelli noodles that have gone into the boiling water. That takes about 2 minutes to cook. And there it is. It is done cooking. I prefer rice vermicelli noodles when I am serving a waakye feast as opposed to regular spaghetti. I just prefer the texture. So you can use regular spaghetti if that's what you have. So the stew has been sitting for a while. It's cooled down and the oil have all resurfaced on the top. So now I'm just skimming it off. See how easy that is? And the oil I will store in the freezer because one day, pretty soon, I shall be preparing an omelette or some jollof rice or some more Waakye stew, and I can reincorporate this oil. It's seasoned and well spiced. Of course, you cannot have your Waakye stew without some hard-boiled eggs in there. Yeah, so your Waakye stew is incomplete without your hard-boiled eggs. I've thrown in a few pieces of my fried fishiness to start soaking up some of that goodness before we dish it out into our serving bowl, as I am doing right now. Just look at all these flavors. This was scrumptious, just to say the least. Now I'm also going to throw some more flavor by way of adding some of the stew and a bit of the oil to the vermicelli noodles and stir that in till all the noodles are coated with the stew. And that is how to prepare the talia. How easy is that? This is my children's favorite part of this feast. Yes, if you use vermicelli noodles, I promise you they will love it. And to garnish, I cut up some scallions on the bias and use the green part to garnish. Now let's fry our kiliwili. So I removed this from the refrigerator where it was marinating 30 minutes ago, so that way it comes to room temperature before we throw it into the hot oil. And that's exactly what I'm doing right now. It's going to cook until it's nice and golden brown and crunchy. I like it to cook that way and have those bits that are almost like burnt. It's really delicious and really enhances and maximizes the sweetness of it. Now I'm preparing the gari foto. Very quick and easy. Gari itself is cassava. It is fermented and then it is dried and roasted. And that's just what it is. It's cassava, roasted, dried, and it's very delicious. It has a little tang to it. It's bone dry because it's roasted and dried, so you have to rehydrate it. I used a little bit of water, and then I added some of the Waakye stew and a little of the oil to it. Stir that in, and you have this beautiful color to it. To bring some fresh crunch to it, I'm just roughly chopping up some scallions, threw that in there, and voila, that's all she wrote for that as well. Done. All right, this Waakye feast is happening, friends and family, so stick around. I really thank you for doing that. Now I also have some sobolo, which is sorrel or hibiscus tea. Delicious. Oh, and refreshing too. You need something refreshing to push all of this feast down, don't you? Yes, so that's also done on some ice. And then my kiliwili is also done cooking. Look at that. Perfection. We are right at the 3-hour mark, friends and family. This feast was worth throwing. My family, they were very, very happy. And I also was happy. It makes me happy to see them happy, right? And I know you feel the same way about your own family. So please throw it down for them as well. So I've served some waakye. This is exactly how it's served. A little bit of the waakye, some talia, some gari foto, and also your fried plantain or your kiliwili. And of course, you need some salad. You want to feel like this is balanced and you want to know it's balanced. So add some salad. I have some lettuce, some onions, white and red, as well as some tomatoes. Yes, so that goes on. And of course, you want your fish, an egg, and some of that meat. Oh my goodness gracious, what a plate. This is for the queen. I did all this work. I need to sit down now and throw my feet up, set my back, and dig in. And of course, you want a dollop of some Nanabe's kitchen shito. This is also linked below if you want to try making your own shito. And I added some more of the kiliwili. That is my favorite part. And of course, served myself some sobolo. Some refreshing sobolo to wash it all down. Friends and family, thanks again for watching. Make it a great day and have fun, especially in that kitchen.